Committee on Oversight and Government Reform will come to order, and without objection, the Chair is authorized to declare a recess at any time. A very important hearing today. As you know, the committee has jurisdiction. They have jurisdiction on federal records, they have jurisdiction on the Freedom of Information Act, they have jurisdiction on the National Archives. It's a very important part of our process. We're unique in our nation. We are open, we are transparent, we do provide access to the American people for what they paid for. As you also know, Secretary Clinton served as the Secretary of State from early 2009 through early 2013.
Okay, all 52,000 documents are on the website. And therefore, if we did not respond before, because we did not have the record then, and we have the record now, the 52,000, we put all 52,000 of them up on the State Department public website, accessible to every member of the public.
Again, Mr. Chairman, I think this is the reason for this hearing, isn't it? The sloppiness, the messiness, and the ability for a Secretary of State to do something that shouldn't have been done. Mr. Feeney, do you recall a FOIA request from August 27, 2010 that specifically requested email sent to Hillary Clinton?
Not right offhand, sir.
As of January 25, 2011, this request had been marked pending. Given that this FOIA request specifically asked for records related to emails sent to the Secretary, your processing should have, as I understand, included a review of the Secretary's inbox. Did that processing take place?
Again, sir, I'll have to see if, in fact, the Executive Secretary had actually received the request.
Mr. Chairman, I yield back.
Thank the gentleman. Before he does that, if he'd yield for a second, there was a choice. The Secretary had a choice. She chose to not abide by the rules of the State Department, and she went off and, for her own convenience, created her own account, her own server, and her own mess.
Federal records.
Federal records. There was a choice there. It was not a mistake. A mistake is when you accidentally put the letter E at the end of potato. This is a conscious decision to go a different route. And if you want to protect yourself and make sure that there's not a reclassification problem or something else, then use the .gov account. That's why it's there. It's safe and secure. And by the way, there are two systems at the State Department. You can't just take classified information and hit forward. That doesn't work like that. So we got to get into the depths of this. It's in part why we have the hearings next week, but it was a very conscious choice, and she chose not to use the safety, the security, the expertise of the State Department. She put the country and her federal records in jeopardy and created this mess that these poor people are going to have to clean up for years to come. We'll now recognize Mr. Liu of California.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Ambassador Kennedy, it's true, isn't it, that the Freedom of Information Act does not apply to members of Congress?
To the best of my knowledge, sir, that is true.
So let me just let that sink in for a moment. We in Congress have passed this law asking other federal agencies to meet these standards that we ourselves are unwilling to meet. It is pure hypocrisy. It is a double standard. But it gets worse in this case. Did you know, Ambassador, that all members of Congress get security clearances?
I believe so, yes, sir.
And we get it not because we go through a background check, but because we happen to win the most number of votes in our district. And as members with security clearances, we get to have private email servers. We can have one private email server. We can have 5. We can have 27. We could have private email accounts. We can conduct official business on our private email server, on our private email account. So I'm not going to continue to participate in the hypocrisy of today's hearing. Instead, I'd like to use the remainder of my time to talk about an issue that actually matters. And that is the slaughter of children and civilians in the country of Yemen being enabled by the U.S. Department of State. And Ambassador, as a principal advisor to John Kerry and as an undersecretary, I'm sure that you know that last year the State Department started providing material assistance to a Saudi Arabia-led military coalition in the country of Yemen. Or you're aware that numerous human rights groups, such as Amnesty International, Human Rights Watch, as well as reporters on the ground, have documented numerous war crimes being committed by this Saudi Arabia-led military coalition.
Congressman, I have seen references to that in the press, but if I might, not an attempt to avoid your question, because I would be glad to arrange for someone to. There are 6 undersecretaries at the State Department. I'm the undersecretary for management. My writ is rather large, but it does not. It does not encompass political military activities, foreign military assistance, or others.
I understand.
I'll be glad to work with you, though.
I understand. As a member of the minority party, I do not get to set the agenda, but I have 4 State Department officials here, so I'm going to ask these questions. Are you aware that Amnesty International published a report documenting at least 33 cases where the Saudi Arabia coalition, with the assistance of the United States, targeted and killed civilians, many of them nowhere near military targets? And you can just answer yes or no.
I have not seen that report, sir.
Right. Are you aware that just last month, this Saudi Arabia-led coalition targeted and killed children at a school? There were 28 kids, 18 were injured, 10 were killed, some were as young as 6, 7, 8 years old. Are you aware of that?
No, sir, I am not.
Are you aware that this Saudi Arabia-led military coalition struck a 4th hospital facility last month, this time a Doctors Without Borders hospital, killing numerous patients, doctors, and hospital staff? Are you aware of that?
I think I may have seen that in the newspaper, sir.
You would agree with me, wouldn't you, that it is a war crime if you target and kill civilians nowhere near military targets?
I am not a lawyer, sir, but obviously the direct targeting of civilians without any other justification is certainly not acceptable.
Thank you. And you're aware that the United States is providing refueling of Saudi Arabia jets, logistical support, intelligence, and other assistance, correct?
I am aware that we are assisting the Saudi Arabian forces to combat terrorist activities in Yemen. Yes, sir.
And the State Department has now proposed yet another sale of billions of dollars of arms and munitions to Saudi Arabia that the State Department noticed when Congress was in recess, so that we would have very little time to act on it. Is that correct?
I am not aware of that congressional notification, sir, but I do aware that we work with the government of Saudi Arabia to help combat terrorism in the Middle East.
Combating terrorism is fine. Using war crimes to do it is not fine. Are you aware that a person who aids and abets someone who is committing war crimes can also be guilty of war crimes?
No, sir, I am not a lawyer.
Okay. So my recommendation is that you check with the lawyers of the State Department and you ask them the question, why is the State Department looking like it is aiding and abetting the commission of war crimes in Yemen? And with that, I yield back.
I promise you, sir, that I will arrange for the appropriate senior official of the State Department to be in touch with you.
And to Mr. Lieu, I would I'd also add that we have, for a couple months, been trying to get Secretary Kerry to come appear before this committee, sensitive to his schedule, but we're at the point where we may have to step it up a notch. But it is the intention of the committee to have the Secretary come to answer. So hone those questions, and hopefully that will happen in the next week or two.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. We'll now recognize the gentleman from South Carolina, Mr. Gowdy.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Finney, I had a series of questions for you that I'll submit to you in writing. I'm going to have to deviate from what I'd planned to do because of the ranking member's opening statement, which I found instructive, if not predictable. So I want us to summarize for just a second. Secretary Clinton said she followed all State Department rules and regulations, but the truth is she did not. Secretary Clinton said her unique email arrangement was approved by the State Department, but it was not. Secretary Clinton said she used one device for convenience, but she did not. Secretary Clinton said she did not send or receive classified material, but she did. She said she turned over all of her work-related emails, but she did not. She said her attorneys personally reviewed each email, but they did not. So when faced with a series of demonstrably false statements, utterly impeached by both fact and logic, The ranking member did what lots of criminal defense attorneys do, which is blame the investigator. And when that didn't work, they throw the Hail Mary pass of all criminal defense attorneys. Other people did it too. Which brings me to General Colin Powell, one of the most respected people in our country's history. You know, Secretary Clinton told the FBI, and I'll concede, she says different things to the public than she says to the FBI, but she told the FBI that Colin Powell's advice had nothing to do with her decision to set up her unique email arrangement with herself. Now, I'm going to say that again in case anybody missed it. Secretary Clinton told the FBI, under penalty of not telling the truth, that Colin Powell's advice, email, had nothing to do with her decision to set up that unique email arrangement with herself. Now, I will say this in defense of Mr. Cummings. I understand why he may not believe her. I understand that. I understand why he may have credibility issues with anything that the Secretary said. I get that. But I think it would have been fair when you are using your opening to criticize Colin Powell to at least point out the person you're trying to defend doesn't even say Colin Powell was the impetus behind her decision to have that unique email arrangement with herself. So let me ask you this. Secretary Clinton was asked, because she frequently says 90 to 95% of her emails were in the State Department system. Have you heard her say that?
Sir, I can't recall.
Well, it won't take you long to find it. She says it a lot, or she said it a lot. And then she was asked, who told you that? Who told you that 90 to 95% of your emails were in the State Department system? You may find her answer interesting. We learned that from the State Department and their analysis of the emails that were already on the system. We were trying to help them close some gaps. I like the word gaps. I guess if you consider the Grand Canyon to be a gap, then yes, there were some gaps in her email. Did you have 90 or 95% of her emails on your system?
Again, sir, the only emails we would have is what has been provided recently, which was that 55,000 that we got.
Well, no, I'm going back before that, Mr. Finney. She said you already had them before she gave them to you. You already had 90 to 95%. Was that true?
Again, sir, the emails that we're looking at, talking about the state.gov emails, she did not have a state.gov account. And as far as the emails that we received from her came at that time frame when it was turned to the department and it was processed by a bureau.
But she made this contention before she ever returned them. She said you already had 90 to 95%. She was just helping you fill in some gaps. If you had 90 to 95%, why weren't you complying with FOIA?
Again, sir, what I have in our system is what received by a bureau.
Let me see if I can put that in South Carolina terms that I can understand. If she said that you already had 90 to 95% of her emails before she ever returned them, that ain't true.
Sir, if I may say this, unless she's talking about the files that were sent to other individuals within the State Department, sent to their state.gov account.
Well, how does that capture personal-to-personal emails? And how about the 14,000 that she didn't turn over? Did you have those?
Again, sir, what you're talking about here.
Oh, I understand her position.
Yes, sir.
The fact that I didn't keep them doesn't mean that whoever I sent it to didn't keep it. I get that. What if it's private to private? How are you supposed to have Sidney Blumenthal's emails if it's private account to private account? How do you have that?
Sir, if you look at what we are doing today, in accordance to the Federal Records Act of 2014 that was amended, it requires that if an employee uses their Gmail account or private issued account, they're required by law to send that email to their state.gov account. That was amended in 2014, and that is what I'm briefing and the State Department briefs today.
That sounds like it was a couple of years too late, but I'm out of time.
Thank the gentleman. Now recognize the gentlewoman from the Virgin Islands, Ms. Plaskett, for 5 minutes.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman, and good morning to you all. Thank you for being here. I believe that the ranking member, and I don't want to get into his head, was pointing out the disparity between the two secretaries, not to absolve Secretary Clinton of her responsibility, because as we've all seen in testimony that she's given, that she has taken full responsibility for her own emails, but to point out the disparity and the bias in this own committee and how it treats different secretaries of state. I want to ask you about some emails that I hope you have received from other secretaries. Ambassador Kennedy, do you have any emails from the Secretary of State who was the Secretary of State in December 2002 or January of 2003?
No, no, I do not.
And that would be Secretary Colin Powell, would that not?
Yes, ma'am.
Those are very interesting emails, I would think, because that would be the 2 months before he gave testimony on February 5th, 2003, before the United Nations, saying that there were weapons of mass destruction, which has resulted in the death of almost tens of thousands of Americans with the Iraq War. But this committee, which says that it's investigating these breaches and these emails because they're concerned with the lives of Americans, don't seem to be concerned with the email traffic that went on that precipitated that testimony, which led us to war. They're not concerned at all with those emails, but they're concerned with Secretary Clinton's emails. How many emails have you received from Secretary Colin Powell?
The only ones that I'm aware of that are in our possession are the documents that you just handed out, that we received via the FBI in an interchange between Secretary Clinton and then former Secretary Powell.
I've got a great one from that exchange, which is an email exchange between Secretary Clinton and former Secretary Colin Powell from January 23rd, 2009. And we can put that up there. And I'd ask unanimous consent to submit that into the record. This is 2 days after Secretary Clinton was sworn in, when she asked Secretary Powell for advice on how he used his personal mobile device in his office at the State Department, which is a secure space for classified information called a SCIF. So, Ambassador Kennedy, can you explain why diplomatic security does not permit anyone to bring a BlackBerry or cell phone, an iPhone, into a secretary's office at the department?
We operate under rules laid out by the then former director of the CIA, now the director of the Office of National Intelligence, and you do not ingest certain documents into a secure compartment information facility because they may pick up signals and transmit them out.
Now, Secretary Powell, who everyone, I believe, in the House would admit is an amazing American, a patriot to this country, describes in this email with Secretary Clinton that he used a personal phone line to set up, he quote, to communicate with a wide range of friends directly without it going through the State Department servers. He said he also used that account to do business with foreign leaders and other State Department officials who are using their personal email accounts. Now, this is not to say that Secretary Clinton should have done this. What I'm pointing this out to say is that Secretary Powell, by his own admission in this email, says that he did this as well. And we know that some very, very serious matters were discussed during his time frame, which this committee does not seem to be interested in at all. And Secretary Powell has given how much of his AOL email accounts to you all during your FOIA requests?
We have received no documents from Secretary Powell.
And I heard Mr. Finney say that there is a directive that if an email is sent from a personal email that's related to State Department matters, it should be sent then to a State Department email account.
That is something that was put into effect in 2014 prior to the after the amendments to the Federal Records Act. The earlier requirement was that if you sent an email from your personal account, you could either copy it to yourself or provide a paper copy.
And was a paper copy provided from Secretary Powell?
I'm aware of no paper copies.
No paper copy. And when is this committee going to receive that? And when is the urgency that we seem to have for Secretary Clinton giving us this going to, in fact, be given across the board to the other secretary? Secretary Powell explained that he disregarded diplomatic security, the NSA and the CIA, and used his personal mobile device in secure State Department spaces. He says, and I